Hey guys, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. This is Ankush here from Alif Consulting. Welcome in our Azure Proximity Placement Group video. In this video, we will be going to talk about how the PPG can be used and can help us to improve our application service. Well, here is the agenda of our video. So in this video, we will be going to understand what is the PPG, what is the PPG use cases. We will be going to walk you through with the one of the reference architecture, how you can use the PPGs, and what to expect when you are using a PPGs, what are the best practices you can follow. And at the end, I would be going to show you a demo where I can show you how exactly you can create a PPG and how you can add a VM into the PPG, right? So the placing a VM in a single region reduce the physical distance between the instances. That's true, right? But placing them within the single availability zone will also bringing them a physically closer together. However, as the Azure footprint grow, a single availability zone may spin multiple physical data centers, which may result into the network latency impacting the applications or the workloads which is hosted on the Azure. To get VMs closer as soon as possible and achieving the lower possible latencies, we can deploy our VMs into the proximity placement group. Now, you might be thinking about like when I'm deploying the VMs in a one region, they are going into this data center, right? How the PPG is going to be improve the latency. PPG is the one of the concept which has been there, which exactly what is doing going to do. PPG is going to make sure like your VM should be closer to the each other within the data center or within the two racks or three racks where those VMs has been distributed, and you can achieve the lower latency to basically and get the enhanced performance for your application. Now, one important thing, PPG is only supported with the availability set. It's not supported with the availability zone. As the reason is, with the availability zone, our VMs is got spread across the multiple data center within the region, which have can have a more around 500 miles of distance, right? And when you have a this much of distance, obviously the latency is going to increase. So that's the reason PPG can only use with the availability set. With the availability set, it's gonna make sure your VMs should be distributed into this multiple racks within the data center. But with the PPG, it's gonna make sure your VM should be closer to the racks where your VMs is distributed. Now, what are the use case we have? As I mentioned, PPG is a logical grouping used to make sure that Azure compute resources are physically located close to each other. PPGs are useful for a workload where low latency is required. So the what exactly the benefits is there? Low latency between standalone VMs, low latency between the VMs in a single availability set or a VM scale set, low latency between a standalone VMs or VMs running in availability set or a multiple scale set. You can have a multiple compute resources in a single placement group to bring them together a multi-tiered application, right? Low latency between multiple application tiers using the different hardware type. For example, running the backend VM using the M series in availability set or the front end on the D series in a scale set in a single PPG group. So that's how you can also combine the multiple tiers of your application, which is using the different SKUs. Now, one of the example I can give you is there, like let's say if you are running a multi-tenancy applications, right, where you are going to have multiple databases in a back end which is running on a VM, but in a front end you only have two servers for application where you have a multiple directories, right? In that case, PPG can also help you to have the or achieve the lower latency, because if you are having a multiple databases, you don't know where those databases are located within the data center. Although they are on the availability set, they are also deployed as a standalone database also. So you can put all of them in a one single PPG group and PPG gonna make sure those VMs are closer to the each other and you can achieve the lower latency. Now, here is one of the reference architecture which you can see where you see there is the availability set of the database VM in a cluster, and then there is a VM's standalone VM, and there is a VM scale set. So all of these resources can be put in a one availability, one PPG, and the PPG gonna, as I told you, that's how you can basically have your VM scale set, or the database is basically assigned to the PPG. Now, these VMs can be put on a one PPG to have the lower latency across the all resources, or if there's any other specific VMs, like if there's a VM which is having the web tier, and there is a VM which is having the database tier, they only need to be closer to get the lower latency. You can put only those VMs also. But if there's any other VM like app, or is there any VM which is like a messaging queue, cache is running there, right? Kind of scenarios where you might be running some sort of import queries for to the databases. In that scenario, you can also put all of those into the single PPG to achieve the lower latency. Now, how or why or what exactly we can do using the proximity placement group. A PPG is a resource in Azure. You need to create one before using it with other resources. Once it's created, it could be used with virtual machines, availability set, and the scale set. You specify a PPG when creating a compute resources, providing the PPG group ID. That's something you can do. Like while you're creating a VM, or you don't have any PPGs created, you need to have a PPG created, then only you can have that into the assigned to the VM. Or what you can do, if you already have created a bunch of VMs but you haven't done or you haven't created any PPG, that's something you can do or update the later on also. You can add all of those VMs in a PPG which you have recently created, but there is a downtime for that, because to have a VM into the PPG you need to stop deallocate the VM, then only you can have the VM to be added into the PPG. Now, why we need to do a stop and deallocate, right? So, one thing, when you do a stop deallocate, it means you are releasing all the compute resources which has been assigned to the VM, and the Azure or the backend there is only gonna make sure all the metadata information or the disk should be available with them, but compute resources should be released. Now, as soon as you added the VMs in a PPG and you basically started back those VMs with that PPG configuration, it's gonna make sure like you have a compute aligned or assigned to the resources, but all of those compute should be to the closer to the each other. So that's the reason you need to stop deallocate the VM to release your compute resources. So you can also move any of your existing VMs from one PPG to the another PPG. That's something you can do when you're moving a resources into a one PPG to the another. As I told you, you need to stop deallocate the VM again to have the closure, right? Or if there's some VMs which has been not supported with this queue on the PPG, but you really want to move them in a PPG, you may also need to change this queue to match that queue with the supported PPG group also. The PPG is a co-location constraint rather than a pinning mechanism. It is pinned to a specific data center with the deployment of the first resources to use. Once all resources using the PPG have stopped deallocated or deleted, it is no longer pinned. So that's a mechanism how it's work. Therefore, when you're using the PPG with multiple VM series, it's important to specify all the required type upfront in the template when it's possible, or follow a deployment sequence which will improve your chance of successful deployment. If your deployment fails, restart the deployment with the VM size which has been failed as a first size to be deployed. So that's how you need to also make sure to do the deployment, because as we know, as we understood, the PPG is a co-location constraint rather than a pinning mechanism. So in this case, what exactly is going to be happen? Uh, it's pinned to a data center, a specific data center when you started your deployment, and once your first deployment, first resources is deployed, right? And sometime what happen, your PPG can be failed because of the VM SQs or maybe the template which you have which you are using it. So what exactly you need to do? You need to make sure when you are creating a VMs with the PPG, all the specific information should be there. If there is any deployment which get failed, restart the deployment with the VM size which has failed as a first size to be deployed into the PPG. So that's how you can use, or these are all of these options can be there which you can use with the PPG, or have the PPG using the PPG in your environment. Now, what are the best practices, right? For the lower latency, use the PPG group together rather than accelerated network, right? So this is a one of the thing. So accelerated network and PPG, sometimes people get confused. Both of them are a different concept. Accelerated network basically is kind of mechanism where it's remove the jitter and directly use the host LAN card or the LAN port to route the traffic. But latency, the PPG is a something uh, where you can basically, uh, have your VM closer. Now, how you can how basically have them used together? So, like, as I mentioned, like both people get confused with PPG and accelerated network, right? But when you combining both of them together, right? You are having the accelerated network and you are having the PPG. It's gonna improve your latency also. This can give the lowest latency for your workload. Deploy all VM sizes in a single template in order to avoid landing on the hardware that does not support all the VM SKUs and the size you required it. Include all of your application tier into a single template so that they will be deployed at the same time. Now, as I mentioned, PPG have a certain limits. All these VM SKUs are not supported. So you need to make sure you should have all the VMs deployed through the single template to avoid the landing of the hardware that does not support the VM SKU. So let's take an example. We have a multiple VM series as we know, but all of those VM series have their own racks or their own servers. Those all the VM series cannot go on the all the on the on the physical server. So you need to make sure all the sizes should be defined in a single template so that Azure can spread all of those VM accordingly to make PPG happen. If you're scripting your deployment using the PowerShell CLI or the SDK, you may get the allocation error, which is over constrained all allocation requests. In that case, you should stop deallocate all the existing VM and change the sequence in the deployment script to begin with the new VM or the size that is failed. So this is something which you need to take. Now another best practices is when reusing a existing PPG for which VMs are deleted, wait for deletion to fully completed before adding the VM into it. Last, if latency is your first priority, put the VMs in the PPG and entire solution is in an availability zone. But if resiliency is your top priority, you spread your instances across the multiple zones. A single placement group cannot span into the zone. So that's something you can do. So if latency is your primary priority, put the VMs in the placement group and entire solution into the availability zone. But if resiliency is your top priority, spread your instances across the multiple availability zones. So that's the thing, like as this mentioned. So all of these best practices are there, which you need to keep in mind when you are using the PPGs. Now let's move to the demo. So in this demo, I will be going to show you how exactly you can create the PPGs or how you can add a VM into the PPGs. So I have already created a VM and created a PPG on the Azure for the demo perspective, but let's quickly jump on the placement group and see how we can create it. So you need to search for proximity placement group. You need to go here As you see, I already have created the one. To create this one, you just need to click on create. You just need to specify the resource group in which you need to create. Your subscription should be active. You just need to select in which you need to do. You need to specify the region. As we know, the PPG is also on the data center level. So these are the region specific. So you need to select the region. You need to define the name. You can go ahead and have your tag added, and that's it. You can go ahead and you just need to click on create to create the PPG by with putting all of these things. So let's take an example. If I say Alif demo PPG 001, that's it. Next, review. So it's going to be verified, and you just need to click on create button to create the PPG, right? So as soon as this PPG is created, this is how it's going to look like. You will be going to have your PPG type. You will be going to have your co-allocation status align. Now, as I told you, this I have already created. So all of these things like a type or like a co-allocation status is already assigned to this PPG because I have tried to add I have added a VM in this PPG earlier. But if you really have a very new I would say the new PPGs to be created. So let's take an example. The deployment which I've done in a center India. So let me go ahead and create a one more in the one in the center India. Then you will be understand what exactly I mean to say. So that type and the collocation is something which is already assigned to that PPG because I have already added a VM in that PPG and remove it back. But when you are creating a PPG first time, those co-location which is there and the status is would not be there until unless a new VM is deployed into that PPG, right? So where is that? Go to the resources. Okay. So if you see, this is the PPG which has been created, which I have created. So if you see, these are the things. Now, because this PPG is already there in that subscription, or it's already created in that resource group, that's how it's showing it, but it would not be showing it on a first PPG which is already created. In my case, I have already created a PPG in a same location and in a same resource group. That's the reason it's still showing me the same information, right? Now, how you can add a VM into the PPG, right? So creating a VM, as we know, is a very simple and straightforward process. Now, if your VM is in a stop deallocated mode, then only you would be able to add the VM into the proximity placement group. You need to drop down, you need to select for PPG, and you need to click on save. As soon as you click on save, or if you go back to your PPG, you would be see uh, your co-location status is unknown. The reason is because this VM is in a stop deallocated mode and the compute has been not assigned to this VM. As soon as you go back and start this VM, right? This VM is deployed in availability zone in a center India in John 1, and you just need to refresh it and it's in started. So if you click on refresh, as soon as the VM is completely started, the co-location is status is changed to the aligned, and the VM is now part of this PPG group. So if you go back, if you go here, and that's it's aligned, it's every all the errors, nothing is there, right? So now how I can remove this PPG, this VM from this PPG? If you go back to the VM, if you go back to the configuration of the VM, you would see I have options to do that, but if I click on go here, or if I click on none, it would not be allow us because the VM is still in the started or running mode, right? As I told you, VM need to be in stop deallocate mode to add and remove the VM. So let me go ahead and stop the VM, right? As soon as I stop deallocated the VM, I would be able to remove this VM from the PPG. So let's wait for this VM to be stop deallocated. Currently it's in a daily deallocating state. So it's going to take a few seconds. Yes, it's still in a stopping state, right? So as soon as it's in a stop deallocated mode, right? If you go into the PPG, you will see your status should be changed to the unknown. Now, if you go back to the VM, or if you go back to the configuration option, and if you go down to now, you can select the none. Yes, none and other PPG groups are already there, but now if you select the none and you click on save, your VM configuration will be get updated, and your VM from the PPG is will be removed, right? So as of now, we don't have any VM in this PPG group. So that's how you can create the PPG, and you can add a VM in and remove a VM from a PPG. Well, that's it in this demo. I hope you like this video. If you like, please click on like and subscribe for more upcoming videos, and feel free to reach us if you have any questions. Thank you.